Support for WYES is made possible by Mary Lou Kristovich in memory of her husband, William Kristovich.
I'm Peggy Scott Laborde, and welcome to Steppin Out, spotlighting the New Orleans area's arts and entertainment scene. Seated at our table tonight, Sam Emerson, a photographer for motion pictures, television, and music videos. Examples include the films Driving Miss Daisy, Pirates of the Caribbean, Mambo King, Michael Jackson's video Bad. It's a lot. It's quite the career. He is here to discuss his current exhibit of iconic photographs of famous musicians from the 60s through the 90s. Welcome. Good to see you, Sam.
Nice to see you as well.
Hello there. Ian McNulty, he's back, and we're so glad. Food writer for the New Orleans Advocate. Hello, sir.
Hi. Thank you.
And making her Steppin Out debut, Pamela Arceneaux, senior librarian and rare books curator at the historic New Orleans Collection. And she is here to discuss her recently published book, Guidebooks To Sin, an intriguing exploration on the history of Storyville. And we're so excited for you, because that was many years in the making, wasn't it, Miss Pamela?
A long time, but it's here at last.
Here at last.
Thank you, Peggy.
Sure. And Steppin Out theater critic Alan Smason, editor of the Crescent City Jewish News. Poppy Tooker will be returning next week. But first up, Sam. Sam, we're so glad that you now live in New Orleans, but for many years you were a man about the world, and especially LA. And it is great that you are sharing in an exhibit quite the panorama of photos. First of all, how did you get into the biz?
It's what I always wanted to do from high school on. I always wanted to be a photographer. My father wanted me to be an accountant, an attorney, anything but a photographer. He even took me to Texas at one trip to have me evaluated as a photographer to prove that I couldn't be one.
Okay.
So it cost him a lot of money, and down the road he goes, gosh, I could have saved thousands of dollars if I'd just gone with you.
Well, we're glad that you're living here, and tonight Sam is actually sharing some images with us. And first we will see a montage of Frank Sinatra, Joni Mitchell, Ray Charles, and Quincy Jones. Let's take a look. So that is you. That is you.
No, actually, that's the producer.
That's the producer.
I never could. There's Frank.
But these are both.
Frank and Barbara are both at the same. Recorded at the same place. It was Capitol Studios in Hollywood. There's Joni. That was. There was Ray Charles. That was a special TV special with Ray. I like that shot. Mm-hmm. That's Quincy. He was especially honored when he was up in Seattle. Did a special honored him. There was a. It was like he and Stevie. He and Ray Charles were both from the same town. They were both from Seattle. And I have lots of stories, but I can't tell you about the two of them when they were together.
Well, let's talk about Barbara. Tell us about Barbara. And apparently she had her angles, her favorite angle.
Barbara was great. You were always told, you stay on my left side. If you were her photographer, you shot her left side. If you were her friends, you sat on her left side. If you were people she didn't know very well, you got the other side.
Was she prima donna-esque?
No, she was great. You just had to know when you could shoot and when you couldn't shoot. You just had to be very careful about when she was recording, about things to do. But I worked with her years later, and I took her some prints, and he goes, oh my gosh, I remember these so much. It was so much fun. And that made you feel great. And we were good friends.
Now the term unit photographer, so you're hired to basically chronicle the recording of an album or a music video or a movie. You're on the set.
I'm on the set. Same with the movie. I was more, for a long time, Elton's personal photographer. I traveled with Rod Stewart, Elton John's photographer for a long time. Was Fleetwood Mac's traveling photographer for 3 years. Then I moved on to Michael Jackson, and I traveled with him everywhere he went for 10 years.
Wow. Well, speaking of that, let's hold that thought, because now let's view photos of Elton John, John Lennon, Michael Jackson, John Belushi, Stevie Nicks, and Bruce Springsteen. So, Elton John, obviously on stage during a concert here.
Yeah, that was a rehearsal right there at for the Madison Square Garden show. There was one of the live shots we did of him at the Red Piano.
Did he have any requirements in terms of the way he wanted to be shot?
Not at all. He was great. Yeah, and I still love his music. Michael had to be lit a certain way, but Elton had no such restrictions.
Now, what about John Lennon? When was that shot?
Well, the John Lennon came on the plane with us when we were traveling across the United States, and Elton said, "I want you to come to the New York show, do the New York show with us." And he said, "Well, I'll only go on the show if whatever gets you through the night gets to #1," and it did. So we did rehearsals in New York, and right before we went on stage, when we went to rehearsals, he said, "Elton, do you think anybody's going to remember who I am?" And he said, "I wouldn't worry about that, John." But John was very nervous, and John did get ill. He excused himself. I followed him, of course, as a photographer should, and went to the restroom, and then we moved on from there. He was very nervous about going back on stage.
Now, Michael Jackson, 10 years is a long time.
I started working with him on Billie Jean. So started with Billie Jean, and we went from there. I did almost every video. I missed Thriller. I was working on a film, but I traveled with him for 10 years. Met Prince Charles, Princess Diana. Prince Charles said, "Mr. Emerson, very nice suit." "Thank you, sir." So I worked for him the next night. We had dinner with Franco Zeffirelli, who you would know, and Sophia Loren in Rome. Then Jackie Gleason in Miami. But it was just an incredible life. I worked on every continent with him, except Antarctica. Not a lot of concerts in Antarctica, but every other continent we worked together on.
At some point, do you have to get sort of an intuitive feeling about when you need to stick around, be more in the background? I mean, you know, it depends on the person.
Well, sometimes you get that look. Sometimes they just kind of look at you, and then yes, sir, I understand completely. You don't have to say it, you understand it. But I think when you work with somebody that long, and they listen to you. I mean, we did some shots with Michael that we would discuss on the airplane. I saw some Japanese students when I was there with Fleetwood Mac, and I said, "Mike, these people have these little yellow caps, these little students, in white shirts. So why don't we find the school, have somebody find the school, I'll get up high, and we'll surround you with these yellow hats, and you put on a red shirt, and do this." Life magazine.
Oh, wow. Well, I had the good fortune of going to your exhibit. It's at
And I appreciate that
Zeitgeist,
very
right down the
much.
block from Southern Food and Beverage Museum, and a ton of photos. I mean, you really get to see certainly your career, and I'm sure that's just the tip of the iceberg, too, and very reasonably priced, and you should do a book.
Well, we're hoping, knock on wood.
Yeah.
We're hoping. We'll see.
And what was very nice is, though, a portion of the proceeds go to Zeitgeist, which is quite the venue for so many art films and events, you know, for many, many years. That Rene Broussard is the Energizer Bunny and all of that, so it's nice of you to include that. And you live nearby. You're in Uptown.
Only a few blocks away, but I go to that theater all the time, and I figured that I could do something to help him. So I sponsored the show. I paid for all expenses, and all the donations went straight to Zeitgeist.
Very generous. And up through May 13th.
Right. We've extended a week.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Hopefully you get some jazz festers this weekend. And once again, your website.
My goodness, don't do that to me, because I really don't know my website.
Sam Emerson, huh?
I haven't gone to there ever. It's Sam Emerson Photography something or another.
Okay, well, just Google Sam Emerson. Anyway, we're glad you're here.
Thank
Thanks
you very
for being
much.
with
Appreciate
us.
it.
Wonderful photos. And it's so nice to see Ian, and you've got the Cinco de Mayo, don't you?
That's right. May 5th on the calendar, Cinco de Mayo to our stomachs. Now, all across the land, wherever people sling tequila, shoot tequila and sling tortillas, you know that Cinco de Mayo has become sort of this big party, the celebration of Mexican heritage. Well, across New Orleans now, I know you've noticed over the last few years, the diversity of Latin American food has just exploded. It's gotten so much more richer and authentic and delicious. And this is nothing against the places of, the Tex-Mex mold, the old cantinas. Gobs of yellow cheese have been very good to me. I get along with them very well. But there's a different style of Mexican food out there now that comes a little more directly from Mexico. And I'm going to walk you through a few places just to show you the diversity of what's out there. We're starting a Magazine Street with Del Fuego Taqueria. One reason I love this place is Well, the way that they have with Mexican seafood, it's so bright and light and fresh. And just think about a platter like that in the summertime. You want something different next to a margarita, or my favorite, the paloma, the grapefruit and tequila. But here's something that's really special about the place too: the number of salsas that they make here. They make anywhere from 6, 7, sometimes more salsas in-house. All these different flavors, and salsas are just the soul of Mexican cuisine to me. Add so much flavor to it, and what a great dedication they have to that there. Across town in Broadmoor is a new place called El Pavo Real. Now this is one of those little crossroad areas where Louisiana Avenue ends with, where Napoleon Avenue, thank you, ends onto Broad Street. And it's a neat spot, and you walk inside, it kind of has the feel of a mom and pop kind of place. The flavors are bright and clean, the sauces made in house. That's a stuffed relleno there with just a beautiful presentation. This is a little more low key than your big party time cantina kind of thing, but really good flavors, really affordable.
Easy to park.
Easy to park, great for brunch too. Yeah. And next we're going back to O.C. Haley, right near Sam's exhibit, to Casa Borrega. This has been around for a few years. What a place, though. Meticulously detailed on the inside, even obsessively detailed. The whole place is like a work of art. The cuisine, very authentic Mexican. There's the borrega right there, some lamb with tortillas to make your own tacos, of course. The courtyard on a night like tonight, oh my goodness. When the weather is nice, it's just a perfect place to be.
They were a bit of a pioneer on O.C. Haley.
Absolutely they were, and just well worth seeking out. There's lots of music there, a great place, nice cocktails too. And then finally, a place that really has a special place in my heart. This is Taqueria Chilangos. I wrote them up this week in the New Orleans Advocate. You can look it up online if you want to read more about this place. But this started as one of those taco trucks that arrived right after Hurricane Katrina. I mean, months afterwards. This guy, David Montes de Oca, he came here in a wing and a prayer, without much more, and started serving tacos. Well, he transitioned that into a restaurant, and this is his Taqueria Chilangos in Kenner, just off Vets. It's as authentic, homemade, and real as it gets for Mexican food in New Orleans. Right there is a fun drink. They call that the Jarrito Loco, a crazy jug. It's a tequila cocktail in what looks like a flower pot, basically. But a fantastic place if you like authentic Mexican food and those flavors. We're so lucky to have such great diversity now of many Latin American cuisines, and Mexican is as good as it's ever been in New Orleans.
And many of them started in a truck, huh?
Isn't that amazing? I mean, just Taqueria Chilangos is a great example of that. Who knew where New Orleans was going to go in 2006? But this young man showed up in a truck, started serving those workers who were here en masse to help us rebuild, and then decided he liked Louisiana so much he wanted to build a business in his life here. And his family has joined him from Mexico City.
Oh, that's great.
His mom is in the restaurant on the weekends making tortillas by hand and her special salsa verde. It's a really nice place. And if you're a karaoke fan, like me, you'll want to go on the weekends when they are rocking those Jarrito Locos and passing around the karaoke mic, mostly in Espanol.
About Ian McNulty. I did not know. Thank you so much.
Sure thing.
And New Orleans Magazine's quiz queen, Julia Street, has a question for us. Last time, Michael Sauce named the Jazz Fest stage located in the Grandstand's paddock area, and the other named after a Cajun expression. Those are the Lagniappe and Feu d'Odo stages. Now tonight's question. What are the names of the backup bands for Kermit Ruffins and Trombone Shorty? Email your answers to steppinout@wyes.org. Our prizes: a year's subscription to Louisiana Life magazine. Also a tea towel with the message beer, bourbon, and beignets from our friends at wearablevegetables.com. Plus a $50 gift certificate from our friends at Kitchen Witch Cookbooks on Bayou Road. You can visit wyes.org for our online calendar to see our lineup of events, and you can also link to our WYS YouTube channel to view our program. And now on to Pamela. Pamela, Storyville Legendary. Just for the uninitiated, though, talk about the location, roughly where it was located.
The location, which was set up by a legal process, by a city ordinance, is Basin Street to Robertson, and from Iberville to St. Louis Street. So it's just on the other side of the French Quarter, just off Canal Street. So that was the official location. in the original ordinance that was created in 1897 to go into effect on January 1st, 1898, there was also provision made for what was called a black Storyville in the uptown area around where Duncan Plaza is. This was a poorer area. It's the area where Louis Armstrong grew up. The city fathers struck that part of the ordinance before the whole Storyville ordinance went into effect, like I said, January 1st, 1898. But for about 20 years, it was red hot and rolling along, and it was a big venue for music. It was an entertainment destination. So it wasn't just for the women, the brothels. There were music clubs, there were restaurants, there were saloons. Anything of interest to a man about town looking for a night on the town.
Speaking of that, of course, as we said, there were these guidebooks, hence the name of your book, Guidebooks to Sin. We should point out around what was Simon Boulevard Plaza was actually the Southern Railway Station. And in many instances, when the young men who were arriving and coming into New Orleans, they were handed off by a newsboy a little directory called the Blue Book. And I'm sure locals used it too. And this is what you're chronicling, which is in effect a directory to the houses of ill repute in what we would be called White Storyville, but they actually didn't even call it Storyville. Didn't they call it the district?
Most of the people who worked and lived in that area just called it the district. It's also referred to in the newspapers as the Tenderloin, which was a generic term for vice districts all over. But the Blue Book, they were issued pretty much annually, and they were introduced, each new edition, just prior to carnival season in anticipation of an influx of visitors to the city. So these little booklets, it's a marketing strategy. They are marketing good times, the top of the line houses, and these clubs and venues to visitors and locals coming into town and letting off a little steam around carnival time. So yeah, they were issued about that time.
And speaking of carnival too, there would be balls, put on by some of the better known gentlemen.
The CCC Club Ball, which was always the the Saturday night before Mardi Gras, and then the club of the two well-known gentlemen, their ball on Mardi Gras night.
Right, and this is Basin Street, we should point out, and an interior, one of the mansions, Miss Hilma Burt's. Some of them could be very fancy, and then, unfortunately, the total opposite, the cribs would be very, very bare.
And of course, there was all sorts of ranges and middle-of-the-road brothels. The whole area was pretty much a general New Orleans neighborhood. The architecture is fairly ordinary, what you'd see almost in any New Orleans neighborhood of the period. But there were certain of the houses along Basin Street, which was the main drag, the Arlington, Mahogany Hall, Hilma Burt's, Willie Piazza's, the Countess, one of my favorites. And then there was the Star Mansion. And all of these were advertised as the top of the line places anywhere. Fine art, tapestries, furniture, decorated. It was a place for men to go and relax, as well as fine female company for hire, as it were.
Now, by 1917, and then years later, they started tearing down the buildings, and then was it the Iberville projects replaced the majority of the houses?
For the most part, during the 1930s, the area had become very run down, and it was considered pretty much a slum, and the city began buying up these properties. The Housing Authority of New Orleans, HANO, had most of the area demolished, and in 1941, early 1940s, the Iberville Housing Project opened.
Now, one of my favorite parts of, and because you have spent years studying the various editions of the Blue Books, there were advertisements, and some of them are for, of course, liquor, and including champagne and Veuve Clicquot, and what, Mums, and a few other products that continue on.
Budweiser. Pabst Blue Ribbon. So you have national and even international products being advertised in a New Orleans brothel guide. So,
and of course, the more people would drink, the more money they're spending, in addition to what goes on a little later, right?
everything goes here. Fun is the watchword.
And speaking of fun, please explain A Night with Venus and A Lifetime with Mercury.
Okay. One of the
that
ads,
phrase used during the time.
Yeah. Ads for other goods and services are included in Blue Book, and among them are ads for venereal disease cures. Sexually transmitted diseases of the day. There is no real cure at the time. There is no penicillin, and this is just 100 years ago. But there were all kinds of medicinal attempts to cure the symptoms of venereal disease, among which were largely mercuric-based compounds. So the saying at the time, a night with Venus, a lifetime with Mercury, because if you were out on the town, had a sexual encounter, and contracted a disease, and they would call this either finding crawlers, or gleat.
Okay.
These are symptoms. Then there were ads in Blue Book that would direct you to various pharmacies and tell you what sorts of compounds to purchase for a sure cure in a short time.
Pamela, I want to congratulate you because the book is both scholarly, because you really do examine the books themselves, and yet compelling too.
Thank you so much. It's meant to be an annotated bibliography and also give background information to set the scene and put the books in their milieu.
And you feel for the women, because the women, these are women who sadly are not exactly, doing what they want to do.
It's not like Ona Munson from, or Belle Watling, I should say.
No, it's a far cry.
Gone with the Wind. It wasn't quite glamorous, in reality.
But congratulations.
Thank you so much.
And beautifully produced by the Historic New Orleans Collection. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you.
And we move over to Mr. Allen for some previews and reviews.
I'm so glad you mentioned those planets, because I was thinking of another planet. We won't go there. One of the few shows that I actually did not get to see on Broadway a couple of years ago was Finding Neverland, which was, of course, the story of J.M. Barrie, the man who literally invented, the creator of Peter Pan. This particular play, musical as it were, was created based on a film that Johnny Depp was in called Finding Neverland, and also on a book that was written called Alan Smason did The Man Who Was Peter Pan. And it's basically the story of J.M. Barrie and his relationship with Sylvia Llewellyn Davies and her 4 boys, and how he and that relationship especially inspired him to write this wonderful tale that we know now and we keep in our hearts. He had a relationship with the 4 boys and also a gentleman who became basically the basis for Captain Hook. The show was on Broadway for 565 performances. It did not garner a Tony Award, but on the strength of the performance of Matthew Morrison, it lasted a good long time, and it went on the national tour just last year. So we're very fortunate. It's going to be playing at the Sanger Theater May 9th through the 14th, and I would suggest very strongly, it got great reviews on Broadway, even though it did not win a Tony Award. And again, see for yourself what this is all about. I think it's going to be one of the most eagerly looked for Broadway shows that's in this season that's going to be ending soon for the Sanger Theater. Meanwhile, getting ready to have their second production in as many months, the National World War II Museum's BB Stage Door Canteen is getting ready to wheel out Fats Waller's Ain't Misbehavin'. And of course, if you've ever seen it, it's a musical production based on the life and the songs of Fats Waller. And this is the first of the images that we have of the new show. I'll have a review next week. And again, I want to remind everybody, this is a fabulous show for Mother's Day, for those of you following week, or possibly for Father's Day. It's going to be running all the way till June the 25th, so keep that in mind as well. And again, looking forward to some great work there from them. Who knew that Alfred Hitchcock's film The Birds, by Connor McPherson, was scarier than the film? Apparently it is. And Margot Fanning, Catherine Talbot, and Jim Fitzmaurice are getting together at the theater at St. Claude to produce this, coming up in May, on the 12th of May until the 27th. So it's going to be a little bit later. Next week we're going to be starting up. But I wanted to remind people about this too, because there was a very hilarious The Birds that was done, but it was comically done by a group that was sort of spoofing the Alfred Hitchcock play. But this is actually not. This is actually a real play based on the Conor McPherson tale, The Birds. It's going to be the 12th through the 27th. Also, at the area there, I guess the CAC, we're going to be talking about a new production of Goat in the Road. Goat in the Road normally hangs its hat, as it were, in the Marigny area. They're actually going to be now the CAC, and they're going to be doing a play which I'm looking forward to seeing. This is essentially the voices of the veterans who've returned from various wars to the United States, and their feelings of being unattached and disassociations that they've had and experienced. Also, the voices of their loved ones, their relatives. It's called Foreign to Myself. It's going to be opening at the Contemporary Arts Center on May the 18th. And again, Goat in the Road Production Company, a very fine local production company. So we look forward to that as well.
Thank you very much, Alan. And it's now time for our picks. Sam. Picks of the week.
Oh my goodness!
Are you jamming on Julia?
I was going to jamming. I'm going to be jamming on Julia. That took me by surprise. I'm going to be doing jamming on Julia. I want to go down and see some of the art. I want to see some of the. I haven't seen all of the galleries there. I think that would be fun for me to go see.
All right, sounds great. Ian.
Jazz Fest last weekend. This is your chance to go in and reconnect with your favorite foods. Want to try something new? Check out that Ropa Vieja. That's from the new Cuban Cultural Exchange Pavilion. Congreso Cubano is providing that. It's delicious.
Lots of Cuban tributes out of the Jazz Fest. So much fun.
Yeah,
great
put some in your belly.
And cigars.
Yeah, put them in your belly.
Pamela.
The exhibition at the Williams Research Center, Storyville, Madams in Music.
Yay.
Also, Giants of Jazz at the Collection's Royal Street facility. And we have a new exhibition, A Most Significant Gift, Laura Simon Nelson's fabulous collection of Louisiana-related art.
Which emphasis on the word fabulous is really such
Indeed.
a generous collection, too.
Indeed.
Thank you, Pamela.
Thank you.
And Alan.
Well, it may be Cinco de Mayo, but I suggest we maybe take a little trip to Spain, España, because Pepe Romero, the world-famous guitarist, is going to be coupling with the Louisiana Philharmonic Orchestra for 3 nights of fiery Spanish music. Defy is the three-cornered hat among them, and that'll be at the Orpheum Theater on it'll be Thursday and Saturday night and Friday night on the North Shore.
Okay, thank you so much. And my picks, jeweler Patrice McMurray will be at the Jazz Fest with a collection of her designs this weekend at Tent J near the Blues Tent. And looking ahead, the NOLA Veggie Fest is next weekend.
That's always fun.
Saturday and Sunday at the Kingsley House on Constant Street in the Lower Garden District. And we'll have more on that next week. And speaking of veggies, on almost every menu in New Orleans restaurants these days, there's something for a vegetarian, isn't there?
Times are changing in New Orleans. You know, it's I'm proud to see it. You can get a lot of flavor out of these wonderful fresh ingredients that are coming in. I'm the one to sing the praises of the meat and seafood, of course, in New Orleans. But when you have creative chefs at work like this, you don't always need that steak to bring the sizzle to the table.
And it's amazing how they can make tofu fun.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, at Mofo and Cafe Min, recent memory. It's so delicious.
It's a nice way to lighten things up, or just try something different. Have something that's a little more creatively wrought. See what the chefs can do with it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much. It's great to have you here tonight. And thank you for watching. Good night.